Hello everyone, my name's Claire and I'm your presenter for today's webinar, Inclusive Workplaces, Making Changes to Better Support Neurodiversity. So just before we get started, I'm going to run through a little bit about who Acas are and what we do. So we provide employees and employers with free impartial advice on workplace rights, rules and good practice. We also offer training, and specifically, if you're looking for training to help create a more inclusive workplace, then we have courses available to book now, and Becca is sending a link for you. We help to resolve disputes, and our online advice is updated regularly, where you can find the latest information and workplace advice for employers and employees. Our website has a number of free template letters, forms and policies for employers, HR managers and employees, which are free to download and use. So let's move on to have a look at what our webinar will focus on today. So today we'll look at what neurodivergence is and how to manage it, and how to support neurodivergent staff in line with the law and good practice. To make the most of this session, you may find it useful to take notes throughout, but the webinar will cover the definition of neurodiversity and related employment law, reasonable adjustments, making changes to the recruitment process, managing neurodivergent staff, how to foster an inclusive environment in support of workplace culture, and further support that's available. So often the terms equality, diversity and inclusion can be confused as meaning the same thing. Each of these words has their own definition. Understanding this helps workplaces build effective strategies that improve culture and maximise the skills, strengths and motivations of all workers. In this section, we'll define equality, diversity, inclusion and neurodiversity and look at how the concepts are linked. We'll also discuss the legal implications for employers who do not support neurodivergent staff. So let's start by exploring equality, diversity and inclusion in the workplace. So what do these terms mean? So equality means giving every individual an equal opportunity to make the most of their talents. It means being fair and providing equal job opportunities by removing barriers and supporting people to achieve similar outcomes. Diversity is the range of people in a workforce, and it's about valuing individuality. It includes different ages, religions, ethnicities, and abilities, amongst other characteristics. And inclusion means everyone feels valued and included and has equal access to opportunities and resources, irrespective of background or protected characteristics, such as sex, disability, religion, or belief. So let's take a look at what an inclusive workplace looks like. So an inclusive workplace means everyone feels valued at work and individuals are integrated within their organisation. Employees should feel safe to come up with different ideas, feel encouraged and confident to raise things with managers, and have management approval to try new things that benefit the workplace, for example, improved ways of working. They are invited and encouraged to take part in things such as workplace events, and they have access to career and development opportunities without barriers. One benefit of an inclusive workplace is that it can help lower the risk of bullying, harassment, and discrimination. If employers fail to prevent harassment and discrimination, there is a risk of grievances, which require resources to resolve, and risk employment tribunal, which can be costly and can damage an organisation's reputation. So what is neurodiversity? So neurodiversity is a term that was coined in the 1990s by Australian sociologist Judy Singer, who is on the autism spectrum. It describes the natural range of differences in brain function and processing. It is a diversity and inclusion term used in workplaces. Leading neurodiversity charity, the Donaldson Trust, explained it's a term that aims to promote inclusion. It highlights that people have unique brains that process information differently and have individual motivations, strengths and behaviours. Learning and speaking the language linked to neurodivergent workers helps build trust and confidence between employers and workers, as it shows understanding and cultivates respect. Incorrect use of terms can result in misunderstanding, confusion, and disengagement amongst staff. Although language changes over time, here are some widely recognized terms that you can apply to achieve consistency of language in your workplace. Some related terms include neurodivergent, which describes the person with neurodivergence, for example, a neurodivergent worker. Neurotypical refers to someone whose brain works in a way that society expects, based on how that society operates. And neurotype describes the way a person's brain functions, and it's an overarching term for neurodivergent and neurotypical. Please note that Acas uses these terms impartially based on research of recognized terms. Neurodivergent workers may prefer other terms to describe themselves. It's always beneficial for employers to get to know workers individually. So it is estimated that around 1 in 7 people, so between 15 to 20% of people in the UK, are neurodivergent. Some forms of neurodivergence may result from incidents such as brain trauma, whilst others can be largely or entirely passed on through a person's genes, which form their biological makeup. Neurodivergence is being diagnosed more commonly in adults, meaning some individuals may not know they are neurodivergent and not view themselves as being neurodivergent. It also means that some individuals could become neurodivergent during their careers. Research has shown that neurodivergence may arise due to menopause or long COVID, showing how many nuances exist when it comes to causes. So the list on this slide is not exhaustive, but it does show types of neurodivergence. It is common that they co-occur in neurodivergent individuals, meaning that they have more than one form of neurodivergence. Each form has its own range of characteristics which can vary for individuals. For example, dyspraxia can affect movement and balance. For some with dyspraxia, learning to drive a car is difficult, whereas for someone else it may affect their ability to play sport. The traits can present differently from person to person and could change in individuals over time. It is helpful to have an awareness of traits related to neurodivergence. However, avoid stereotyping based on better known characteristics. For example, due to representation in the media, you may expect someone with Tourette's syndrome to unintentionally swear. But according to the NHS, this will only present in around 10% of people who have Tourette's syndrome. It's important to consider the individual and their traits to support them as much as possible and help to optimize their skills and talents. So, neurodivergent people can be underestimated and not given the support needed in the workplace. From research that was taken in the Neurodiversity in Business and Work report in 2024 by Birkbeck University, there's a clear need to improve support for neurodivergent workers. The report collected evidence on the experience of workers and employers when it comes to neurodiversity. One conclusion was that employers are not acting adequately to support neurodivergent workers. In 2024, Acas asked line managers to share their views on neurodiversity at work, and employers reported that the primary reason for not implementing support was a lack of workers sharing information when they have a neurodivergence. So while workers have no legal obligation to share such information, it is recommended that employers follow good practice principles that consider needs in advance rather than in hindsight, which is a preventative approach. This could be done by getting to know the individual and their working style and establishing a culture of support. Leading by example with fair and consistent treatment towards all staff and having relevant policies and procedures also helps. Building trust and confidence makes it easier for staff to discuss what adjustments are needed. Recommendations from the Birkbeck report include employers being more proactive, such as offering workplace adjustments or employee training and embedding a wellbeing and inclusion strategy. Proactive steps reduce time and energy needed to respond to things as they happen. and reduce risks of discrimination, which could lead to employment tribunal. So not all neurodivergent workers have a disability. However, the way traits affect the individual could meet the legal definition of disability. So the legal definition of disability is set out in the Equality Act of 2010 and states that a person has a disability if the person has a physical or mental impairment and the impairment has a substantial and long-term adverse effect on their ability to carry out normal day-to-day activities. Long-term means a period of at least 12 months, and day-to-day activities means activities someone carries out in their personal life or activities needed for a person to be included at work. This could include walking, driving, using a computer, or shopping. It is important to be aware of this, as failing to support workers with a disability could result in discrimination, giving rise to employment tribunal, which could be costly to employers both financially and in terms of reputation. So by law, employers must not unfairly discriminate or allow discrimination. Discrimination is less favourable treatment because of a protected characteristic, such as disability. Employers who carry out or allow discrimination risk employment tribunal claims. For the purpose of today's webinar, we focus on the Equality Act, but Acas do run in-depth training courses on neurodiversity at work, which does go into more detail on legal considerations and good practice linked to neurodiversity in the workplace. You can explore available training and you can book using the link that Becca is going to post in the chat function for you. So let's look at types of discrimination prohibited under the Equality Act. So direct discrimination is treating someone less favourably because of a protected characteristic. It can occur by perception, which would be less favourable treatment due to assuming a person has a disability, and by association. This is less favourable treatment because the person knows someone or associates with a disabled person. Indirect discrimination could occur where rules or arrangements apply to a group of employees or job applicants, but in practice are less fair to those with protected characteristics, and this can't be justified. Harassment is unwanted conduct related to a protected characteristic. It's defined as an act that has the purpose or effect of violating a person's dignity or creating an intimidating, hostile, degrading, humiliating, or offensive environment for someone. And finally, victimization, which is when someone is treated less favorably and suffers a detriment, which means being treated worse than before because they took action relating to discrimination law or were involved with a discrimination or harassment complaint. This is a complex area, so for more information you can see Acas guidance on disability discrimination key points for the workplace, and that's available in your handouts. So disability is one of the 9 protected characteristics of the Equality Act 2010, and it makes it unlawful to discriminate against a person because of a disability. Employers also have a duty of care through contract law and have a duty to protect the health and safety of workers. There are 2 types of discrimination which apply solely to disability. So discrimination arising from disability occurs when a disabled person is put at a disadvantage in a way that can't be justified because of disability or something relating to disability. An example of something related to disability might be difficulties in reading for a dyslexic person, and where there's a failure to make reasonable adjustments. The law protects workers whose employer fails to make reasonable workplace adjustments. Making reasonable adjustments is a requirement of employers under the Equality Act 2010, although what is reasonable may vary according to the circumstances, resources, and other factors. So let's take a look at reasonable adjustments in a bit more detail. So reasonable adjustments are the steps taken to help an individual gain the most from their strengths by removing or reducing barriers that they might experience because of neurodivergence. The British Disability Forum define reasonable adjustments as changes to the working environment or working arrangements needed by a disabled person so they can do the job as well as possible. Adjustments will vary according to the needs of the worker and the job role. A reasonable adjustment could be made to the workplace or the way things are done. And an example of a reasonable adjustment could be providing noise-cancelling headphones for someone who works in a busy office and has sensitivity to noise because they have ADHD. So by law, an employer must make reasonable adjustments when they know or could be reasonably expected to know that a person has a disability, when a worker or job applicant with a disability asks for adjustments, when a worker is having difficulty with part of their job, or has a sickness absence record or delays returning to work due to their disability or for reasons linked to their disability. It can be difficult for neurodivergent people to get a formal diagnosis. It's therefore good practice for an employer to focus on the reasonable adjustments they can make rather than focusing on whether the person has a disability. Where there is a cost for reasonable adjustments, it is the employer's responsibility to pay for it. However, the government's Access to Work scheme can help with advice and costs subject to circumstance, and you can find a link to this scheme at the end of the session. Even if an adjustment has a significant cost associated with it, it may still be cost effective overall, for example, compared to the cost of recruiting and training a new staff member. So this case study is inspired by a real employment tribunal case. So let's have a look at what happened. So the claimant brought a disability discrimination claim against Starbucks after she was accused of falsifying documents relating to fridge and water temperatures because she entered incorrect information by mistake. The worker claimed that she'd always shared her dyslexia to the employer and reported problems at work, such as difficulties with reading, writing, and telling the time. The Employment Tribunal found Starbucks had failed to make reasonable adjustments for the worker's disability and had discriminated against her. Instead of finding ways to support the worker with reasonable adjustments, Starbucks accused her of falsifying records and treated her unfavourably. This case is a useful reminder of the importance of making reasonable adjustments. Once an individual tells their employer they're suffering or need help due to a disability and linked traits, the employer must make reasonable adjustments. So we'll now look at what employers should do when making reasonable adjustments. So firstly, employers should identify where the adjustment is needed and if it's reasonable. Does the adjustment need to be made to the workplace, the way things are done, or does it involve providing additional support? Consult with the individual as they'll be in the best position to know what they need. It opens a two-way discussion about adjustments. Often, small, simple changes to working arrangements or responsibilities will be all that's required. For example, people with ADHD might struggle to stick to start and finish times. Employers should aim to be flexible. For example, offer start and finish time windows rather than sticking to strict timings. Research options and get professional advice with the agreement of the worker, from occupational health, for example. Or you could look to complete a workplace needs assessment to identify required adjustments. Make decisions after full consultation and keep the individual informed throughout the process. And this should be reviewed regularly to check that they're still appropriate and working as intended, because situations and neurodivergent traits can change over time. A reasonable adjustment passport records what adjustments are agreed with managers and workers. It can help avoid repetition, ensuring information is passed on to managers on a need-to-know basis. So on this slide, we're going to go through more reasonable adjustment examples. Remember, each worker will be different, and you should not assume that two people with the same neurodivergent need the same adjustment. Remember, any adjustment should be made with the agreement of the individual, but some examples include adjustments to the work schedule, which could involve a change to working pattern, such as providing extra breaks, adjusting start and finish times, or encouraging flexible working arrangements. A reasonable adjustment could be to the role and responsibilities, such as reviewing workloads and agreeing what duties can be done, prioritising tasks that make the most of their strengths and reassign duties that are more difficult, And where possible, be flexible on how a task is completed, for example, the order of completion. Another consideration is adjustments to the working environment. Noise levels can be a problem in the workplace, so you could look to provide room dividers. These enhance soundproofing and provide visual barriers between workspaces. You could look to provide private space when quiet is needed, and bright lighting can also be an issue for some, as it can be distracting and contribute to sensory overload. Neurodivergent workers could be given a workspace away from such lighting with more natural light. Alternatively, you could seek to provide daylight desk lamps or make light levels adjustable. You could look to offer opportunities to work from home where possible. Flexible working can be beneficial for neurodivergent workers, as busy commutes and noisy environments can be overwhelming. A reasonable adjustment could also be to equipment and technological support. For example, purchasing speech recognition or speech to text software, making information available in an alternative format, and providing software or overlays to reduce visual stress from computer monitors. So in the next few slides, we cover points to consider when creating an inclusive work environment, as well as how to manage and best support neurodivergent staff. So let's have a look at the recruitment process. So whilst job applications should offer the chance to share a disability and the need for reasonable adjustments, applicants are often reluctant to do so for fear that it reduces their chances of getting the job. Also, as we mentioned earlier, neurodivergent applicants may not consider themselves to have a disability and therefore not realise they have the right to reasonable adjustments. Just for reference, your handout provides a link to further useful information relating to this slide. So, what can employers do to make recruitment more inclusive during the application? Job advertisements are often written using lots of industry jargon. To attract more neurodivergent candidates, use plain English, avoid using acronyms, focus on essential skills and experience needed, and avoid any unnecessary information. Provide clear and straightforward instructions for completing a form and offer different ways to complete it, such as by email, post, online, or in person, and ensure it's accessible. Give examples of reasonable adjustments offered by the organisation to assure candidates that they are genuinely able to request adjustments, and use affirmative and inclusive language, and provide guidance notes in an accessible format for all applicants that explain the structure of the interview. You may choose to include some example questions and answers. Employers can also join the government's Disability Confidence Scheme to help recruit and retain and develop employees with disabilities. Perhaps this could be advertised at the application stage. So how about keeping interviews inclusive? What should employers consider for this part of the recruitment process? So firstly, you should look to train interviewers in unconscious bias, provide training on how to avoid making assumptions on a person's abilities or an applicant's body language, allow applicants to see questions they'll be asked before the interview and during the interview, and ask clear and specific questions, avoiding any open-ended questions. Consider alternative options to interviews, such as paid-for work trials or practical assessments. If a candidate is unsuccessful, provide clear and constructive feedback. And if a candidate is successful, seek their consent to advise their new manager so support can be provided from the outset. So on this slide, we're going to go through the key steps to best manage neurodivergent staff. Whilst these steps will benefit all staff, they can be particularly important for neurodivergent staff as they help with early identification of issues before they escalate and prevent misunderstanding. Neurodivergent workers might not share information with their manager or colleagues because they fear being judged or discriminated against. So managers need the skills and awareness to build good relationships with individual team members. Employers should provide managers with training opportunities and additional information on neurodiversity that will help improve their skills. Neurodiversity awareness training across the organisation can also help develop a general awareness, understanding and appreciation of colleagues. Autistic people might struggle at work if there's a lack of structure or clear communication. Having clear communication helps to provide a consistent approach, helping create equality in the workplace. And you should treat each team member as an individual. Identify their skills and motivations, as well as what they each want and need from you as a manager. This will build good working relationships and encourage staff to come to you when they have questions or any difficulties. This could be achieved by holding regular one-to-one meetings, check on how work's going, identify any challenges, and agree how best to support any individuals. You should look to monitor staff workloads, ensure that staff are not overloaded or placed under any excessive time pressures. And managers should continually reflect, considering how they can better manage each team member, checking job roles, tasks, and objectives are up to date. Managers should provide necessary support to the individual, actively listening and reporting back to senior leaders where they find opportunities to improve inclusion at work. Following these steps will help foster an environment of openness and tolerance where staff feel safe and empowered to share their neurodivergence. So you should encourage sharing of information about neurodivergence. So why is it important? It's the individual's choice whether or not they wish to share that they're neurodivergent at any point. However, if staff feel able to share information, they'll be more likely to tell managers and receive the support that they need to do their job. So how can you encourage staff to share information on neurodivergence? Firstly, check workplace policies and guidance on disability to make sure that they're up to date and reference neurodivergence. Employers could create a standalone neurodiversity policy. This could improve understanding and provide a framework for management and staff to follow. This may also show that employers are taking steps to prevent discrimination, harassment, and victimisation. Highlight the organisation's commitment to supporting neurodiversity, the actions being taken to improve the workplace, and try to share this information in different formats so that it's accessible for everyone. Encourage neurodivergent senior managers and leaders to openly talk about the topic. This helps create an open and transparent working environment. Senior leaders who champion neurodiversity can help make it clear the organisation takes neurodiversity seriously. This can create role models and send a positive message both internally and externally. And create a support network and make sure that you regularly publicise it to staff. If a team member does share that they are neurodivergent, then you should discuss whether the team member is happy for the rest of the team to know. This could be beneficial to working relationships by encouraging others to provide necessary support. If they do agree to tell others, you should look to clarify what they do and don't want their colleagues to know, who will be told and who will do the telling, where, when, and how. And will the neurodivergent worker be present when the information is shared? A key point is that managers must not tell other staff about a worker's neurodivergence without their agreement. If the matter cannot be resolved between the employee and line manager, you should potentially consider seeking advice, such as the Acas helpline, internal HR, company policies, or from occupational health. Whether additional adjustments or further support may improve performance or conduct, or whether other duties or potentially whether an alternative, more suitable role could be appropriate. Starting formal disciplinary procedures because of performance should be a last resort for any employee. You can check the Acas guidance on discipline and grievances at work for more information. So employers should make sure that their workplace and the way that they work is accessible to as many people as possible. In this final section of the webinar, we look at the benefits of an inclusive environment for everyone, not just for neurodivergent staff. Firstly, we'll look at ways employers can support neurodivergent staff at work. So working remotely and hybrid working is an option in many workplaces. Neurodivergent staff may be more productive and under less strain when distanced from the workplace if they experience sensory overload. Think about allowing staff the flexibility to choose where they work if it's possible. This could reduce anxiety and help to establish new routines. If remote working is available on a permanent basis for your workplace, think about the tools, technology and software you can invest in to support neurodivergent staff in reaching their full potential whilst working from home. Review any existing reasonable adjustments as they may not work in the home environment, and remember, adjustments depend on individual needs. It is a legal requirement that employers carry out health and safety risk assessments for all staff. If you're aware that a worker has a disability, you should review existing risk assessments to make sure it covers any risk to them. Communicate in a clear and consistent manner, and if you are making changes in your workplace, give staff as much notice as possible. As an example, autistic people are highly dependent on routine, so changes can cause distress. Reduce this risk with good communication skills. Employers have a duty of care towards staff, meaning they must do all they reasonably can to support their health, safety and well-being at work. Health and Wellbeing provider Health Assured report that neurodivergent people are likely to suffer mental ill health or poor well-being due to a lack of support and the stress of masking. The term masking is often used to describe acting neurotypically to avoid negativity. Consider a wellness action plan as a means of individual support, and you can find one of these in your handout from today's webinar. Acas do provide mental health training, and if this is something that you'd like more information on or you want a book, you can follow the link that Becca's going to send in the chat box for you now. To achieve an inclusive environment, create a workplace culture that supports everyone by tailoring support to their individual needs, and it will have benefits with regards to a worker's mental health and well-being, a worker's motivation and productivity, and it will support staff members who need more assistance. Tailoring support and taking an individual approach could improve performance, engagement, and therefore help to attract and retain talent. It prevents serious or legal issues arising, such as bullying, harassment, and discrimination. As a wider organisation, a good place to start to ensure your workplace is inclusive is to have a clear and accessible policy covering equality, diversity, and inclusion. When developing a policy, you should consult with your workers and any representatives. Offer training to upskill line managers to confidently handle difficult situations that may arise. Acas have training available on this, which is linked in your handout. Provide genuine methods for the employee's voice to be heard and ensure that different groups feel able to access them. And you should look to assess inclusion in the workplace to ensure the policy, training, and other methods are effective. So moving on to the next slide, we're going to look at some useful resources. You can find further information from Acas on making your workplace inclusive by following the link provided in the chat box. For support in making diagnostic assessments, workplace needs assessments, or implementing adjustments, Access to Work can provide advice and assessment of workplace needs for individuals with disabilities or long-term health needs who are already in work or about to start work. And Becca's sending a link about that now. Occupational health providers can conduct health assessments for neurodivergent workers and identify adjustments that would help individuals in the workplace. And finally, we have a list of useful websites for more information. A copy of these slides can be downloaded in the handout section, so you'll be able to access each link. You can also stay up to date with the latest in employment law by signing up to the free Acas newsletter. Simply follow the link in the slide that's also in your handout. So that does conclude the presentation, but please do stay till the end, where we'll talk you through how to save all the important information from today's session. To summarise what we went over today, we've discussed the definition of neurodiversity, legal implications and what reasonable adjustments can be implemented, making changes to the recruitment process, steps that help in managing neurodivergent staff, overall changes that can be made to create an inclusive environment and supportive culture for everyone, and where to find further support. And a reminder, that's also available in your handout. So let's move on to have a look at what training Acas can provide around this. So our webinars do run regularly, and you can get more information via the link in your handout. We hope you will join us again, but we also have training options that will equip you with more in-depth knowledge. Our digital courses are available via Zoom and will give you the opportunity to interact with our knowledgeable trainers to explore some of the challenges that you may be facing. Our face-to-face training has now resumed and is available for you to book. To check out the courses that we have available, Becca is sending a link in the chat function for you now. We have lots of training products to choose from. For example, if you've enjoyed today's webinar and want to understand how you can support your employees in the workplace, we have a great training event that provides a greater understanding on how to implement reasonable adjustments. This can have a positive impact on employees' well-being and productivity. Please follow the link that Becca's going to paste in the chat function for you now. So Acas can work alongside you to provide tailored support for your workplace. And if this is something that you might be interested in, you can give us a call on 0300 123 1150. A wide range of training can be delivered in person as well as on a digital platform. So we have lots of options that can support you with workplace problems and keep you up to date with good practice, whatever method you prefer. We hope that helps, and we really hope to see you on one of our courses soon.